I'm 76 now, living a routine life, mostly alone for the past 48 years. My life's been about work and not much else. I've made more money than I know what to do with, but it doesn't fill the emptiness. I still work out regularly, and people often mistake me for a man in his early 50s. This morning started like any other: breakfast, a workout, and a movie. Around noon, I decided to go for my usual walk. I live near a cemetery, and I often stroll through its peaceful paths. Today was cold, typical for February, and as I entered the cemetery, I noticed a small sign with the name Francis on it. That was the last name of my former best friend, Charles. Against my better judgment, I followed the path toward the service. When I arrived, the service had just ended. People were getting back into their cars, and I stood at a distance watching. Even from afar, I could see the matriarch of the group. It was Maura, my ex-wife. I hadn't seen her in 15 years, but I recognized her instantly, now a 75-year-old version of the woman I once loved. As the car carrying Maura passed by, it suddenly stopped. She got out, tears in her eyes, and looked directly at me. "Eric, you've barely aged a day. I can't believe you came, thank you." Before I could react, she rushed forward and threw her arms around me. Out of reflex, I hugged her back, feeling more awkward than I've ever felt in my life. "Maura," I whispered, our eyes locking. We kissed, warm and tender, just like we used to. But then she pulled away, her eyes filling with tears. She said the words I never wanted to hear again: "I'm so sorry." She quickly retreated to the car, leaving me standing there stunned. As she drove away, I thought to myself, "Charles, I hope you were watching. With any luck, I'll be her last kiss. Take that, you dead bastard." I was about to leave when the driver got out and approached me. He extended his hand, and I shook it. "Eric, right? I'm Scott, my mother's oldest. I know about your history with my parents. I want you to know they never stopped regretting, at least to some degree, what happened between you all. My father had dementia toward the end, and he spent the last few years asking where her husband Eric was and if he'd be back soon. Seeing you today was a lot for her. I'm sorry, he's gone now, and she's grieving. You understand, right?" I looked him in the eyes and said, "My boy, I understand all too well what it's like to lose your spouse and best friend in one moment." With that, I turned and continued my walk down the path. With everyone gone, I stopped by Charles' headstone. It read, "In loving memory, Charles P. Francis, 10/6/1995, 2/14/2072, beloved husband and father." I couldn't help but think that the last line should have read, "Treacherous bastard and backstabber," but no one asked me. For a moment, I entertained the thought of coming back at night to piss on his grave, but I won't. Knowing that I haunted him in his final days is comfort enough. Today marks the 10-year anniversary of Maura's passing. I'm 99 now, and I finally took the effort to print out her obituary. Maura Mackenzie Francis passed away after a long battle with breast cancer on May 5, 2085, at the age of 88. She was born to Sean and Theresa Thomas. After college, she became a teacher and later had a long and prominent career as the superintendent of schools for the Worcestershire School District. Maura was married to Charles P. Francis from January 1, 2025, until his passing on February 14, 2072. She is survived by her 3 children, Scott, Henry, and Jeannie, her 6 grandchildren, Warren, Robert, Alex, Lorna, Aurora, and Kurt, and her 8 great-grandchildren, Logan, Sean, Rachel, Bishop, Elizabeth, Catherine, Allison, and Peter. Maura loved to spend time with her family and volunteer throughout the community. Services will be held at Wilson Funeral Home on May 8 at 10 a.m. She will be laid to rest next to her husband at Frost Cemetery. I've read this obituary countless times over the past decade, letting it haunt me. I've spent 70 years wallowing in sadness because of what she and Charles did to me. But recently, that sadness turned into something else: anger. A few months ago, I saw an ad for Ancestry DNA kits. They were offering a 90% discount for anyone over 90. I figured, why not? When I got my results back, I matched with one of my brother's kids. Another regret of mine, not keeping in touch after they moved several states away. But the real shock came when I saw two other matches. Teen girls living right here in my city named Rachel and Liz Francis. Scott was mine. Maura had lied to me for 70 years. I still remember the day she told me she was 6 weeks pregnant, just 2 months after we separated. She made me believe it was Charles' child. But it wasn't. It was mine. I recently met with Rachel, Liz, and briefly with Warren, their older brother. Warren's still struggling to process everything. He loved his grandparents, and now, knowing the truth, he's in disbelief. But he did say he wants to visit me again to learn more. The girls were curious about me, though they couldn't believe I was nearly 100 years old. They kept saying I looked younger than their grandpa did when he died, my son, who passed away 2 years ago at 68 from cancer. I'm thankful I got to shake his hand that day 23 years ago. Rachel's heading off to college soon, and Liz plans to join her in a couple of years. They shared stories about their lives, their parents, and their extended family. When they talked about Maura, I sped them through that part. I didn't need to hear more about a woman who filled my memories with so much disdain. We parted ways with promises to see each other again before school starts. For the first time in 70 years, I felt something like happiness that day. But I was also angry, angrier than I've ever been. I never forgave Maura and Charles for what they did, but if I'd known they were hiding my son from me, I might have killed them myself. Of course, there's nothing I can do now. All I can do is hope that Warren comes to visit again, and maybe brings his brother Robert and my great-grandson, Logan. It's the first thing I've looked forward to in a long time. The last dozen years of my life have nearly made up for the previous 70. It all unfolded in the most twisted way, but I've managed to build a family. My biological grandchildren and great-grandchildren have become an important part of my life. Developing a bond with the great-grandkids was pretty natural, but Warren and Robert took some time. I understand. They had grandparents they loved and who meant a lot to them. There was some initial tension in the family when I came into the picture. People were concerned that Charles might not have fathered any kids, and DNA tests were done to confirm they were indeed his. Since Charles had been gone for over 25 years, they couldn't get a sample from him, but the tests confirmed that at least Warren, Robert, and the others were full siblings. Their doubts were finally put to rest when Alex, Ginny's son, found a post-it note in the family home's junk drawer with the login information to Maura's Google Drive. There, they found a memoir by Maura that detailed her life up until she was about 61. The memoir included her confession that she had lied about Scott's conception. She had claimed she was 6 weeks along instead of 10, and had said Scott was born prematurely. Charles never knew the truth. The rest of the memoir was fairly mundane, nothing particularly scandalous about Charles or Maura, which was a bit disappointing. I never read it myself, only getting the details secondhand from Rachel and Liz. The two girls, Rachel and Liz, have really taken to me. I don't see them as often as I'd like, but I cherish the moments we do spend together. They introduced me to various social media platforms, and to my surprise, they helped me become somewhat famous. I now have over 2 million followers across 3 platforms. It's funny how things turned out. What once seemed like a curse has now become a source of connection and purpose. When I first met the girls, I wasn't sure they'd want to see me again, but they did. That second meeting gave me the motivation to move forward with my life. I went to see my doctor, who confirmed what I already suspected. I was in incredible shape for my age. My vision, hearing, and cognition were all perfect, and my joints felt like those of a man in his 30s. The doctor said, "It's like you don't age, at least not like the rest of us." I used to think of my longevity as a curse. I remember cursing the heavens on my 95th birthday, wondering why I was left here like this, especially since I had no one to spend my time with. But now, with my newfound social media fame and the connections I've made with my family, I finally feel like I have something to look forward to.